So great information as always, guys. Obviously, talking about that need for leveraging digital in a correct way. We all have been exposed to it, experienced it on a day-in-day basis. I think that was a great way to really kind of allow us to digest it in a very easy manner. So we're going to continue to move forward. And next up, we are going to talk about, speaking of digital, we're going to get into basically the current challenges that we face in cybersecurity. As you know, cybersecurity is the thing that's extremely important. And so we're going to talk about some of the current challenges that we face in cybersecurity. And to help us do that, we have Rusty Stewart, who is the CTO of Seventh Night, along with Brad Houghton, who is the CEO of Proton. So I'd like to welcome them to the stage. They should be coming out of this door at any moment, but they're not coming out of this door. See? Are they standing by? They're good? Okay. All right, guys, so once again, don't forget, this is not graduation style. When I say the names, you guys give them a round of applause. So once again, we're going to welcome to the stage Rusty Stewart and Brad Houghton. There you guys go. Good job. See, you guys did good.
Thank you, everybody. My name is Dan Ruddy. I work for NADA. One of the pleasures I have there is we started an affinity program, and I've invited these two gentlemen, subject matter experts in the cybersecurity space, to join us to talk about the risks, cybersecurity, ransomware. So we're just going to jump right into it. You know, we've all heard and read in the media with Ukraine and Russia, and you hear about these ransomware attacks. And what is cybersecurity, Rusty? Just start us off, just high level.
Oh, absolutely.
What are we really talking about here?
I mean, when we talk about cybersecurity, that's a really big bucket. And we want you to think about all your data, every piece of it. If it's sitting on your machine, if it's sitting on your phone, an iPad, a tablet that you're using. And that's not just when it's sitting, it's when it's in transit. So between you and the internet, between you and a customer's email, that's cybersecurity. Between you and an online web application that you use for your dealership, cybersecurity locally is very important to all of these transactions.
And we hear a lot with cybersecurity of ransomware, ransomware attacks. So Brad, could you elaborate a little bit on that and what that means to our dealers today?
Yeah, sure. So ransomware is kind of the most famous cyber attack we see. It's basically where a threat actor has gotten into a system and has encrypted everything. The point of it is two things. Number one, they're going to extort you for your data back. Number two, they want to destroy your operation, so you can't do deals. You can't sell a car. You can't write an RO. You literally come to a grinding halt. So by doing those two things, they demand that you pay them X amount of money, typically $1 million to $3 million, to get your stuff back, meaning your data is now available to you, and to actually get your operational capacity back. So that's typically kind of the big one we see from a cyber attack that gets a lot of press. It's also one of the ones that has the most significant operational impact. Toyota, for example, had a cyber attack 3 weeks ago, and it pretty much shut down Toyota completely. All the manufacturing facility was down for several days. It actually came in through a supplier that was using their just-in-time inventory system. And so once it came in, it then spread through all of Toyota, took out a couple subsidiaries as well. So things like that just bring
you
it to a stop.
You said once it comes in. Can you elaborate of how are these attacks happening? Who are these threat actors? And just elaborate on that, please.
Sure.
Externally, right? These people are scanning the internet and they're saying, "Hello, is anyone there?" Because your computer, it's like a door, and the internet is the outside world. And they just can knock on the door, and if you respond in a certain way, then they know who is at the door. And they can say, "Let me in." And sometimes, depending on the security problem that piece of software might have, it just says, "Okay, come on in, do what you want to do." Separately, you have the phishing schemes, the email, and your own employees will open up an email, possibly give away personal information, and that would give them the access they need to your services to gain information. They can then use that additional information to gain access to your local network and your computers. Another big problem is what we call ransomware as a service, and these are whole groups and organizations that write ransomware packages for people. So an employee that's disgruntled can go on the internet, they can pay a company to write a ransomware package. They can then bring that package in. They run that package locally. From that point on, that ransomware company deals with the dealership, deals with the company, the organization, does all of the negotiations for the money, and then that employee gets a cut. And this has happened many times at this point.
Yeah, I'd say we're seeing mostly, Eastern Europe, Asia as most of our attackers, and it's very automated, very complex systems that are. I'd say we see thousands of attacks a day, probably across the 400 dealers that we manage.
And Brad and I had a discussion a couple of weeks back of what is the day in the life of when a dealer does get attacked. They come, the dealer shows up. Does it come through the service department? Does it come through an email? Can you describe really the day in the life of what happens, what they have to do, the next steps?
Yeah, so I could tell a story. It's the only one I'm allowed to tell because it was a Rigo Auto Group down in Florida. They had 5 large CDJR stores. They got a lot of press, bad press, but Jim Arrigo, the owner at the time, that's now been bought by Morgan, but the owner at the time was very open about the experience. So we got a call from him on a Monday morning about 7 a.m. Got referred to us through a mutual acquaintance. They had been hacked over the weekend. It actually started on a Thursday before through an email phishing attack, where a finance manager had downloaded something he thought was legitimate, clicked on it, that started the attack. They made their way through the system, and by Sunday night at midnight, they blew up everything. When I say everything, he had 600 users, so 600 devices had a ransomware attack called Ryuk, R-Y-U-K, had a little message pop up. Basically, all 600 devices he had were completely worthless. You couldn't run CDK. You couldn't do much of anything with them. So he, at all, I think he's at 5 large stores. At all stores, he couldn't do anything. Could not write an RO, couldn't sell a car, couldn't do a deal. I mean, nothing. So it took us, I want to say, about 2 days to kind of get services back. We basically installed a couple PCs at every business function. So we put a couple guys in for the writers, a couple PCs for the F&I guys, and then we just eventually reloaded almost 600 PCs over the course of a couple weeks. He had out of 23 servers that ran the organization, I think 21 had been encrypted. They didn't have good backup systems. Those have been destroyed as well. So he was down, I would say, completely for 72 hours and limited functionality for another 2 weeks.
And when we talk about that, we think of all the impacts that would have from the dealer. Like you said, it came in from the F&I department. It affects everything: sales, F&I, service, parts. What is the level of next steps, the immediate priority? What is the first steps you do in that situation?
I mean, you've got a couple different things you've got to look at. You've got to try to figure out what did they get, and from a legal standpoint, what are you dealing with from there? Do they have your customer data? What do you have scanned in? And a lot of dealers, everything should be in your DMS or your CRM or your hierarchy or whatever you're using for your internal payroll. There really shouldn't be a whole lot in a dealership from customer data. But you'd be amazed how many sales guys will scan driver's licenses, and how many F&I guys will scan credit applications and leave it on a computer, leave it on a shared drive. So you've got to figure out, what data was impacted, what do they have. You got to put a value on that real quick. You got to let your attorneys know. You got to let your insurance guys know, and then you got to figure out operationally how am I going to get back to work. What is it going to take to actually restore functionality? Depending on your DMS, depending on your internal setup, it could be. Fairly simply, I've seen people run to Best Buy and buy every computer in Best Buy and bring it back and get on DealerTrack because it's web-based. It really depends on kind of exactly how bad it was, but it's definitely a big hurdle to try to identify, what's happened to you and what do you need to do to get operationally up and running. Not to mention, clean it all up at the end.
And Rusty, we read a lot and we see in the news of beware, the ransomware, the Ukraine, Russia. Do we anticipate there being more threats to our dealers?
I mean, absolutely. And that's all organizations, not just dealers. Small companies are now the new target, medium companies. 70% of ransomware attacks have ties to Russia already. And we know that is continuing on the rise just from the last 2 weeks, not just from the government itself that is kind of facilitating this, sadly, but also the citizen warriors that are now being involved and actively going after anything that they can disrupt and cause damage to.
Yeah, so one of the things we're seeing recently, really in the last year, I guess, is automated platforms that are doing some really complex cyber attacks without human interaction. So you'll see, for instance, Emotet, right? This is a toolkit that basically will get into an email inbox, dump the email inbox. Here's where it gets really unique. It actually dumps your last conversations you had, maybe the last 90 days or even 6 months worth of email, and will send emails back to people that you corresponded with an infected attachment. So Dan, you might get an email from, looks like it came from me if I've been the victim, and it's got an attachment on it that says, hey Dan, here's that thing we were talking about. And the conversation actually looks like a conversation you and I had previously. You're much more inclined to click on that attachment. All right, so by doing that, you've gotten affected as well. But the entire toolkit that downloads from the command and control server, starts scanning the network, starts identifying, scoring everything, happens fully automatically. They don't have to actually have a human involved until they really get further deep in the network. And then someone jumps in and says, okay, this is a big target. Based on the domain, this is XYZ auto dealer. It's probably worth 500,000, 500 million, whatever. We're going to go after this one and actually go all the way with it. But the ability to automate all that means they can attack millions of targets, with a bot network at absolutely no cost to them. So the ability for them to mass attack things, indiscriminately, is amazing right now. So when you start seeing, Russia getting into this attack mode, they are going to be attacking a lot more. And yes, they're going to be attacking government targets and things like that. But they're also going to be attacking indiscriminately every US-based IP address. So it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter what you are. If you're in the US, you're getting attacked a lot more, really, in the last week and going forward over the next few months.
And this isn't going away. And this is your home. This isn't just your dealership. When we say IP addresses, we are talking about every IP address in the United States and every other country. This is your home, your friends, your family as well. So cybersecurity doesn't stop at your business. It's your employee that takes a laptop home. It's your employee whose phone is being used at Walmart. It's all the same.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because we have so many touch points now at our dealership through our vendors, through mobile devices, like you said. How does a dealer protect their systems when their salespeople are using a cell phone out in the lot and scanning a VIN and doing a trade-in? Those are all potential areas for these bad actors to come in and get into the system.
Oh, absolutely. In the industry, we call that mobile device management software, and there are lots of tools that can perform the same basic functions: Microsoft Intune, IBM Mass 360, several tools, and you're putting those certificates on each device. So each device that your employee has connects to your MDM, and then you can track that device. You can remotely wipe that device. You can lock that device. You can see if that device has the most current patches on it. Control of that and information and being able to print those reports is mandatory for compliance. It's incredibly powerful tools.
Yeah, the other thing you can do is isolate any device that comes in. If the dealership doesn't own it, it's not on the dealership's network, period, done, end of story. If someone brings in their cell phone, we'll put them on a guest network. We'll put up a little printer out front so they can print to it, but there is no need for a personally owned device to be on a corporate network. Just none. So once you start isolating things, that adds a level of protection.
All right, so let's change subjects a little bit here. We've all heard of the Federal Trade Commission putting out the safeguard ruling and what that affects our dealers. NADA has put out a driven guide. Brad Miller at NADA has also done a webinar on this. But as it relates to ransomware and the things that the dealers have to do to become compliant with the new released safeguard rules, how does ransomware and these tools play into that whole aspect?
So, Brad did a great thing yesterday, a presentation yesterday on the safeguards rule, and what we found, is that dealers either don't understand what it takes to be compliant or they don't care. It's one of the two. If it's a large group, they want to be compliant. If it's a small group, they probably don't care. So what we've kind of laid out for most of our dealers is, if you're compliant with the safeguards rule, you're also compliant with your requirements from your cyber insurance company. So they almost match up identically. If you look at like Beasley, Corvus, Toco Marine, any of the big cyber insurance companies, if you look at what they're requiring now after they've updated their cyber insurance applications, it almost exactly lines up with what the FTC is requiring. So security awareness training, vulnerability scanning, a SIM solution that monitors your firewall, endpoint detection, kind of all the basic framework that we put in place for cybersecurity insurance and cybersecurity protection actually checks off almost everything on the safeguards rule, except for vendor assessments and third-party assessments, things like that kind of come outside of what we would call normal cybersecurity framework.
And compliance doesn't start and stop with your dealership. Compliance goes to every one of your vendors. So if you're buying a SaaS service online, they need to have some kind of compliance as well, whether that's a SOC 2 compliance or ISO 27001. There are lots of compliance audits that occur for companies. that are separate from FTC safeguards, but are industry standards. And you shouldn't be using companies that don't also meet these requirements in some way or are working towards them.
That's a good point.
I read an article the other day that said, be diligent, work to mitigate this risk. But what does that really mean? What can the dealer do in the short term and the long term? Number one, to comply by the FTC safeguard, but also just for cybersecurity itself.
I would say get multiple opinions on everything you do, right? You don't trust your accounting people, you don't trust your CPA exclusively. You always have somebody kind of do an audit every now and then. I've had dealers come to me and they got back from a 20 group and somebody in the 20 group had gotten hit by ransomware and been down for a couple weeks, and they get back and they say, hey, IT guy, can that happen to me? And the IT guy says, no, we're good, it can't happen to you. And then we go in and do an audit and we find out that not only can it had happened to you, it's already happened to you, you just haven't seen the result yet. I can't tell you how many times we find out that what a dealer thinks he has from an IT hardened standpoint is not what he actually has. So if you have an internal IT team, that's great. Get your accounting firm, get somebody else to kind of come in and help you kind of walk through a cybersecurity framework inspection. If you have a third party, have another third party come in and look at it. Or once again, have your accounting firm come in. Get multiple kind of opinions on what you're doing to make sure that you're not getting sold a whole bunch of crap, all right? Because if you don't understand technology, then anybody can tell you they're doing anything, and you don't have a clue if they're right or wrong. So that would be my first suggestion is get multiple opinions. Second, look at all the stuff that NAD has put together, Brad Miller's put together, quite a few other resources out there on safeguards rule, and just basic cybersecurity framework. Endpoint detection, managed detection, having someone, not just putting the software in place, but actually doing something with it. A case in point, I got a dealer called me September 15th last year. I remember this because it was 14 days from September 11th. And on September 11th, he got hacked, and his email server had been down for 2 weeks. And this was the second time that they'd been hacked. They paid $1.5 million ransom the year before. And now they were looking at another $2 million ransom. The reason why, they'd put all these cybersecurity tools in place, and they didn't license them, and they didn't turn them on. So they installed an endpoint detection platform called CrowdStrike, but apparently they didn't license it, and they didn't actually set it to remediate anything. So it was flagging all these things that were going on for like a week, but nobody was actually looking at it, and the IT guy had no idea how to even access the portal. So they spent $1.5 million last year. They spent, $50 grand on cybersecurity software and didn't use it. So make sure that, you've got some eyes on your stuff to make sure that it's being done right. Multiple opinions. That would be my biggest takeaway.
I'm with you on the multiple opinions for sure. And just know, anyone that gets attacked with ransomware is going to get attacked again. 80% of people that get a ransomware attack on their network get reinfected within 1 year. The package is already there. The damage that they did the first time, part of that was leaving the capability to do it again. So just getting back up and going isn't the end of the war.
Yeah, that's a very good, we find tons of backdoors. When we go in to do incident response, you might find 20 or 30 different techniques to establish persistence in backdoors. So, you've either got to wipe the network clean, or you've got to have a really good team that comes in and helps, understand how they got in, work it all back, find patient zero, and then lock it all down. Because it can, they're going to come back again. If they got you once, they'll get you again.
And no, thank you guys. This is very, very educational. I think you talked a little bit about the cost, right? The dealer might have to take and incur on this. Not only they potentially having to pay the ransom. What is the typical cost that a dealer might expect to have to do these type of things we're talking about here?
Are you talking about an incident response? Like, what are we going to pay if we do get hit? And,
no.
What's it going to cost to get it put back together?
To secure their dealership in the right way, right?
A lot of our third world dealership, owners out here are not making any money, so it's hard to get them to spend money on IT or cybersecurity because there's no gross anybody's making right now. It's kind of a wide spectrum there based on the size, based on the organization, but a single dealer is probably going to spend at least a couple grand a month just on kind of getting all the cyber and everything locked down and getting compliant with safeguards, just the multi-factor authentication and endpoint detection and things like that. And it goes up from there based on the number of rooftops, I would guess.
I'm with you. It's just now the cost of doing business. And our own company is no different. We meet compliance, and every step of meeting compliance sadly cost us a monthly fee, and it was just what we have to do.
I'm sure we spend $250,000 plus internally at our company just on cybersecurity for our own defenses and own systems.
But a lot of it is just educational and awareness, right? At NADA, we have to do our annual phishing awareness and making sure you can
Your annual?
you can view your you know how to identify a phishing email. And like you said, Brad, they're getting very sophisticated. This is the type of make it look like it came from Brad or from an employee. How important is the educational piece versus the technical piece?
So educational, I always tell people you can't fix stupid, and stupid lives in your dealership. That's a little takeoff on the Mayhem commercial for insurance, but it works, right? Somebody in your dealership is going to do something stupid. I guarantee it, it's going to happen. The question is that going to impede them for 30 minutes where they're going to have to fix something? Or is it going to take everything down for 3 weeks? All right? If you can make a stupid action result in a 30-minute activity versus a 3-week just colossal mess, that's really what you want to achieve. You're not going to stop them from doing something stupid. You just have to be able to react to it, mitigate it, so that it happens very quickly. That would be my take on that.
Security is always a wall, right? It's easy to walk across a field, but then you put up a fence, and then you've got to have a gate. And can you just walk through the gate, or do you have a lock on the gate? Do you have 2 locks on the gate? Can the person that has a key bring somebody else with them, or can they only enter themselves? If they come in, can they exit with something? Cybersecurity, any kind of security, always is an inconvenience. The question is, how much can we lower that? How easy can we make it? But there's going to be something that gets interrupted with cybersecurity. But that is far, far better in your 30-minute example than your whole network going down.
But to your point, we did a fun phishing experiment with a dealer. He's actually here today, stopped by the booth. But he asked us to do a phishing test that was really customized for him. So we built a website. Any CDK people out here, plug your ears. It's cdk-support.com. And it looks exactly like CDK Drive. And then we sent an email out from CDK Support that said, you have 7 days to accept our new terms and conditions or Drive will stop working. And so we sent that out to everybody at the dealership. And I called around 11 and I got the controller and I said, how's your day going? And he said, I'm on my way to the owner's office. He's really furious right now. And I said, well, what's going on? He said he's on the phone with CDK because they sent us this email that said we had to get all of our employees to sign in the next 7 days or application was going to stop working. So when you went to that website and you signed in, we just collected the usernames, destroyed the password, and we got 70% of the dealership within the first 4 hours. There were so many misspellings and errors. The site was unsecured. There were so many things we did deliberately to tell you this is a fake website, and we still got over half the dealership to give us their credentials to CDK in 3 hours. So there's a lot to fix, education-wise.
So we have a few more minutes here. Parting words, Rusty, to our dealers here today.
It's due diligence and it's defense in depth. And what I mean by defense in depth is it's no longer an age where you can just go to the big box store and buy a box of antivirus with a firewall and stick it on a machine and you're secure. That's just not going to happen. It's all about your security stack. It's the software that monitors your firewall. It's the piece of hardware that is your firewall. And is it up to date? And is the next piece of software up to date? And it's your antivirus. Is it up to date? Is it your endpoint protection? Is it up to date? It is absolutely due diligence all the way across, and it's multiple pieces, and every piece has to be right.
I would say, FTC now mandates that you pay attention to cybersecurity. All your cyber insurance providers and even your garage liability providers, everybody's telling you have to now be cybersecurity compliant. So it's a cost of doing business. This is your dealership. It's your income source. It's most of your value for most of you, and it's your legacy. You don't want your name up there, And
the clock is ticking, right? Because there is a deadline on the new safeguard, which is, I believe, December 9th, 2022.
You got less than a year to go. So let's get it done.
Well, I want to say thank you. Is there any questions from anybody here quickly before we have a couple more minutes? So I want to say thank you to
guys in the red and black. No.
Well, Rusty, thank you so much. Rusty, for more information on Rusty's company, it's seventhnight.com. For more information on Brad's company, Proton, they have your booth, and Brad's booth is 3051. So
I didn't know the number. That was awesome.
So again, appreciate everybody and appreciate you guys joining us here.
All right, guys. Thank you once